the Stanley Hotel. Now, Evan's arrival at the Stanley wasn't planned, not at all. It was really an act of desperation. He was driving through the high passes in Colorado, after a long hiking trip. And everything, it seemed, was conspiring against him. His phone battery was almost dead. He was exhausted. Maybe most urgent, a storm was rolling down the mountainside, really aggressively, threatening to white out the roads completely. He looked for motels, anything accessible, but critically, everything was fully booked. So isolation, exhaustion, necessity. They forced his hand. It was getting dark, really dusky when he saw it. The sign. Vacancy, the Stanley Hotel. He knew the name, of course. Who wouldn't? The hotel that inspired Stephen King's The Shining. It's the kind of place you might book deliberately, for the spooky factor, for a photo maybe. Not usually for refuge from a storm, but, well, when the alternative is sleeping in your car during a blizzard, your logic shifts, doesn't it? Evan rationalized it. He told himself, sort of deliberately convincing himself, it's just a story. By the time he actually pulled into the parking lot, the fog wasn't just low anymore. It had completely swallowed the mountain peaks. Gone. The building itself looked majestic, sure, glowing white against all that swirling mist, grand, stately. But there was something else, a disturbing quality. It was, as he noted, almost too still, like it was holding its breath. The second he stepped inside, the sensory details hit him immediately. The interior smelled of polished wood, that deep, historical scent. But it was mixed with something else. Faint but heavy. Old perfume. A beautiful smell, maybe, but strangely overwhelming. And right here is where the journey stops being just about desperate necessity. It starts feeling more like an appointment with fate. He goes to check in. There's a young woman at the front desk. She smiles politely, maybe, he thought, a little too politely. And she slides the key card across the counter. She tells him, "You're in room 217. Evan froze, just stopped. Now, you might already know this detail, but the sheer weight of that room number is enormous. It wasn't just any supposedly haunted room. It was the exact room. The one where Stephen King stayed back in the mid-70s. The room that acted like a lightning rod. The one that channeled the whole story of the Overlook Hotel. So Evan tries to inject some normalcy, some human levity into this increasingly strange situation. He attempted a joke, picked up the card, forced a smile, and he said, "Perfect. Hope it's haunted." The clerk. She didn't smile back. Didn't even twitch, didn't react at all. She just held that polite, quiet, unsettling silence. The tension, he said, was immediate, visceral. The journey to the room itself was this long, slow walk down an utterly empty hallway. His footsteps echoed, which felt wrong because the carpet was thick. They shouldn't have echoed like that. It was as if sound itself was behaving strangely in that building. When he finally got to 217 and opened the door, the air inside felt different. He described it as, quote, charged, like a quiet that didn't just absorb sound but seemed to actively press against his ears, if that makes sense. He tried to ground himself, routine things, turn on the TV, unpacked his small backpack. But then, around midnight, the shift came. The power flickered once, a sharp, momentary loss of light. Then it flickered again, longer this time, and then it went out completely. Total darkness, silence, blackness. He managed to grab his phone, turned on its small, frankly inadequate flashlight. The air in the room had changed too. The storm was raging outside, sure, but inside the room smelled of ozone. That electric smell right before lightning strikes? That. Mixed with something else, though, something faintly sweet. He described it as, like flowers gone bad. Whew. Then came the sound, soft, distinct, impossible to rationalize away. Single click. And right after the click, the slow, gradual, utterly terrifying creak of the bathroom door, just easing itself open into the darkened room, all by itself. His heart, he said, instantly started pounding against his ribs. He could actually hear it, even over the growing intensity of the storm outside. He shone the thin beam of his phone light over toward the bathroom, and the light revealed the shower curtain. It was swaying slightly, gently. He said it looked as if someone had just brushed past it, maybe stepping out of the bath, he called out. His voice sounded thin, lost in that immense darkness. "Hello?" Nothing, no reply. The silence was absolute, complete. But then came the single most crucial, most chilling audio detail in this entire account. Faintly, very faintly, coming from the direction of the bathroom, he heard a woman humming. And the quality of that hum, the emotional tone of it, that's what really sets this story apart. It wasn't, a mournful wail or a malicious shriek, nothing obviously ghostly like that. He described it as absolutely casual, like someone just going through their nightly motions, getting ready for bed. That mundane, domestic, utterly non-threatening presence, just completing a routine. While standing where absolutely no one should be. That was far more terrifying, he felt, than any loud, violent specter could ever have been. Evan bolted, didn't think twice. Grabbed his keys, his phone, and just rushed downstairs. He found the night clerk at the front desk. And the night clerk's reaction was, Well, it was profound in its lack of reaction. He wasn't surprised, not in the least. Didn't ask what was wrong. He just looked up at Evan, who was obviously shaking, clearly distressed, and asked one simple confirming question. Room 217. And that's when the story gets its historical footing, its confirmation. Evan nodded, breathless. And the clerk just sighed. Stated simply, almost with a kind of resigned affection, she likes that room. The clerk then provided the identity of this presence, Elizabeth Wilson. She was the old head housekeeper at the Stanley. Way back in 1911, her story is absolutely crucial here. She was involved in a massive gas explosion, one that happened right there in room 217. But this is the key point. She survived the explosion. She didn't actually die there. She recovered and continued working at the hotel for many, many years after that. Driven, by all accounts, by this powerful sense of duty, tidiness, order. In this history, it explains the very specific, almost gentle nature of the reported haunting. The activity associated with Elizabeth Wilson is consistently domestic, tidy, benign almost. They're like residual echoes of a job that maybe feels unfinished to her. Guests report lights turning on by themselves, luggage being unpacked, neatly placed into drawers, and the most notorious detail, the one everyone talks about, waking up in the middle of the night to find that their blankets have been pulled up snugly around them, that they've literally been tucked into bed. It seems to be a haunting driven by this residual need to fulfill a job requirement, to ensure the guests are comfortable, that the room is immaculate. Evan, still trying to grasp onto any shred of rational scientific certainty, asked the clerk, couldn't there be a reasonable explanation? Old pipe settling, just the wind whistling through cracks, old wiring, maybe intensified by the storm. The clerk's response was, for me, maybe the most unnerving line in the entire account. Simple, polite, and just profoundly dismissive of skepticism. He just said, "You're welcome to think that." Evan did not go back to the room to sleep. Absolutely not. He spent the rest of the night shivering in his car, waiting for dawn. But the story has one final unsettling piece of evidence. The next morning, after the storm had passed, he went back up to the room, just quickly, to grab his belongings. The power was back on. Everything looked normal. And the room was, maybe predictably, spotless. Perfect. The bed was neatly made, the curtains were drawn just so, and there it was, on the pillow. Where he knew he had crumpled his head in exhaustion the night before, there was a faint imprint, like someone had just been lying there, waiting.